I'm curious, as someone who watched the show and as someone who works for a tech company, like
A
you're an
massive
actual
one, Cisco.
yeah, a massive one, Cisco, not a small mom and pop company by any means, one of the largest tech companies in the world. What was your impression of the way that the show portrays Lumen, the organization in the show? Because this is a broader theory, but I'm not a fan of Black Mirror for several reasons. The Netflix show that's like all these dystopian horror stories about tech, and one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of it is because I think it creates an over exaggerated fear of tech
Yeah.
and tech companies. Which, I mean, that's what this show does. I mean, this show portrays like an Apple like company as being a literal cult. So, as someone who works at a tech company, what were your thoughts on that? The way that Lumen is portrayed.
I think it's interesting actually when Andrew was mentioning earlier, like, oh, like it reminds me of tech companies and the culture it creates. For me, that completely went over my head because I was like, oh yeah, this is normal. I was like, this is what work is supposed to look like. You know, it's supposed to be like you get your pineapple celebration here, and people's heads are made out of melons and stuff
Has
like
a
that.
marching band ever shown up to congratulate you for hitting a critical milestone?
Not a marching band,
But
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 like
that
you know,
stuff is normal. Like
it's
I'll just
normal. It's
say
normal.
someone was like, "Hey, they graduated their PhD, so they got a bottle of champagne and they said, "Oh, let's open it up." And I remember the last like 10 times I've drank champagne were at a tech company like in the morning where it's like, "We crushed Q4 team. Let's pop these bottles of extremely cheap champagne."
Yeah,
And like that's what you do as a tech company because you need to have these team bonding. Like it plays
I
the
mean,
script
okay,
well.
so it's interesting. I guess maybe I've been in tech for so long, but prior to that, I was actually in automotive. I worked at Toyota Lexus. It's
hmm,
manufacturing, very different, you know, like blue collar type feel
yeah,
than tech. And I mean, for the record, I loved switching into tech just because I felt like, again, yeah, more fulfillment in what I was doing, more direct impact. Also, maybe is because I moved to a startup from this like big company at that time. But in any case, I think it's interesting that the realization I'm having is there are people who don't work in tech, and work
yeah,
for them is completely different than work for me. And that itself was like, oh, I had not thought about it. It just becomes normalized as this is what work should be. You know, work
yeah.
should be more integrated into your life, I think. Which, yeah, a lot of people very much have like a 9 to 5, and it's like just a job that they do and they check out, which they also interestingly portrayed.
Yeah. So wait, so on one hand you're saying there's a similarity between Lumen and tech companies that you worked for in terms of just the culture and the vibe of going in, you have your work friends and they care about you and it's like this holistic thing and kind of cult like you that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but then there's a difference in that, to my understanding, a lot of tech companies, they even though they say they talk the talk about balance, they do kind of
Right.
want you to answer emails at night. They do kind of
Yeah.
want you working overtime. Like I know that's thick at Tesla as an example of a friend of mine who works there. Like,
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's like, okay, so one of the companies, the one I went to right after Toyota was Ecobee. It was like a smaller early stage company, startup. And I was also younger in my career. So I didn't have a family and kids to go home to. So it's like, okay, after work, I could actually like play board games with my uh, coworkers and we'd hang out and maybe we'd go out to a restaurant or something like that. So it was like you would work, but it would also be part of your like social circle.
hmm,
Right. So I think
Yeah.
that that can happen. I think in a lot of workplaces, but maybe it is more common in tech companies. Although I think as you get older, there is just a natural like, hey, I gotta go. I gotta go
yeah,
home. I have this other like
Yeah.
responsibilities. So
It was very instructive in my 20s when I was working a literal blue collar job as a pest control technician, and I was working for a church, and I'm technically a white collar knowledge job, just to see that clear distinction of when one job ends and when another begins. And ministry and media, I mean, social media managers are notorious for working round the clock at companies that
hmm,
don't take boundaries very seriously. Thankfully, TGC has a great culture when it comes to boundaries like that. Uh, it never sleeps. So like you show up for your 9 to 5, but you get a call at 8 p.m. that, hey, there's an emergency. We need you to do something. I never had that in 8 years as a pest control technician. When I dropped my work van off and hopped in my personal car to drive home, that was the end of the day. And I didn't think about it until the next day. It's fascinating to see a tech company portrayed as having the strongest conceivable boundaries between work and life balance, where it's not when he steps into that elevator, his personal life basically stops until he comes back down that elevator. He literally doesn't know the people he works with in the real world. Like, that's one of the mysteries of the show, is like him trying to figure out, like, oh wait, you work for Lumon? Do I work with you? I don't know. I know I spent my physical body spent 8 hours with you today, but I don't know that. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
It's just
realizing
very interesting.
There's actually, this is just like one concept, and there's just so much now that I'm realizing we won't be able to talk about them.
And one of the things that I think the show does extremely well is raise important questions. What does it mean to be human? How do I think about my work? Is work meaningful? Like, I think that subtext, because when I worked at
good.
One of my coworkers literally said to me, like, he sat next to me most of we moved offices as we grew, but he said to me, he's like, the place that I find meaning in life is work.
Yeah.
And a lot of people working in tech, I think this comes with the territory of like, oh no, we care about you. We love you. You're part of the family. Like, there is this kind of weird, we'll do the laundry for you. We're going to make sure your house is cleaned. We'll give you breakfast, lunch, maybe even dinner as well, because we want you to feel loved at work, not just, like, because it's meaningful and it's a place of meaning. And I remember saying to him, do you find your meaning? Is it possible that there's meaning and then there's work within meaning? Or do you think work is meaning? Which comes first? But so, yeah, I think it asks good questions. That's one of them. There's other questions that it brings up about the malaise of modernity, if you will. The first episode where he's like, whoever he is at work, and then he comes home and he's drinking and scrolling on his phone. Wow. Talk about something going on in our culture where we say we work in order to do other stuff with our life, but then what are we doing with the rest of our life? We are numbing ourselves to death.
Yes.
So I found that so on the nose.